Hey, Ian here, and you're watching the Soulful Man Show. I want to thank everybody for being here and for joining in. In this series of interviews, we're going to be exploring the idea of desire and how it contributes to our power as creators in this world. And what we do as work and in creation, we do, of course, to provide for ourselves, for our family. We give ourselves what we need as food that we like and provisions that we need to live and to be joyful. And we're motivated by simple pleasures as human beings. So it's easy to make the connections between what we desire and our effort to get it. But it's not as simple when we're creating the life that we want, because we all have the tendency to get sidetracked along the way and can easily find ourselves in a place that just doesn't speak to us, just doesn't juice us. So in this series, we're going to explore the idea of tuning into what really does give us juice and excitement in that innermost place. And I'm really excited to have Zat with me here today. And Zat is a coach helping men with their deep inner work that we all eventually need to dive into. So what's up, Zat? How you doing?
Got it. I'm good, man. Glad to be here. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. Where you're in the UK doing a tour.
I'm right now in Glastonbury. Yeah. I was just in Brighton yesterday, and yeah, love it here. Spent some time here at the sacred pilgrimage locations here. There's some beautiful places to be in. Some just some really beautiful and uplifting areas, and teaching. Men's work is strong over here. So yeah, happy to be here.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we can dive in by just kind of letting us know where are you at with that work today? Like what are some of the what is the hot topic for you, or in terms of what you're offering people right there in the UK and sort of in general, where are you at?
Well, my focus is on really ultimately is on intimacy, relational intimacy, and so I work with men and women, and I do workshops for men and women. But my main focus is men's work. And what is men's work? I mean, the kind of men's work I do is pretty comprehensive, but it is work focused on, helping men to be on their path of awakening, on their path of awareness. You could call it personal growth. You can call it spiritual growth, depending on what each man's relationship is to that. But it's comprehensive work. But the term I give it is deep inner work, because it is about transforming at our core how we experience reality, or the way we filter and our external life, as directly influenced by our internal life, and helping to transform the world through evolving men, because now we're at a time where men are really open to this work in a way that hasn't been before.
Yeah.
I mean, men's work's been around in its kind of modern form for, really probably about 30 years. It was very sparse at first, but now it's quite common. There's a lot of men out there doing men's coaching. There's a lot more men's organizations, men's groups. It's not an obscure thing for men to be in a men's group or doing men's work. And, it's evolving too. So that's really my focus, is on offering cutting edge men's work, and that's digestible for most guys. And presenting deep inner work and spiritual work in a way that's accessible and digestible for men on the path. Now, most of the men I come in contact with have had at least some experience in work. I generally, sure, I'll get some newcomers, but generally most men who come to the work have at least had a little taste of it in some form, whether they've gone to do, a mindfulness retreat, or maybe they've gone to, they've been steady doing yoga, or maybe they've been in therapy, or, maybe they've gone to a Tony Robbins seminar, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, there's always new guys coming to the work, but most of the guys who are attracted to me are guys who have had, already have some desire for their own growth and awakening.
Right. They didn't just step onto their path. Generally, they haven't just stepped onto their path.
Mostly, sure. I do get some new guys, and I do some beginner, like in some of the men's group that I offer. For example, we have a training where we teach men how to lead men's groups. And it's a very basic, we're not teaching them deep facilitation processes. We're teaching them how in your community to gather a group of men together, and to hold a powerful container for men that come together and open their heart to get out of their old, paradigm thinking and ways of being. Right. And so we do get, guys who are brand new to the work in that, who come into their circles. They're brand new and fresh to the work. And so, we're open to all men. You don't have to be, but generally in my workshops, guys are attracted to the work because they can get a sense from the copy that I write, from the branding, from the marketing, that it's deep and powerful work. Mm-hmm. And usually it's a guy who's like, yeah, that's for me. Once in a while, we'll get a guy who's brand new to the work, and he'll come in, he'll say, well, I didn't know what I got myself into. And then when he leaves, his mind's and his heart's blown open. So just again, most of the guys that come have done some level of work before, but absolutely it's still open to guys who are just fresh on the path.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great that you provide that, like this kind of guidance or paradigm for men's circles, or to create their own groups. As I have found, I've only done that once. I've only participated in specifically a men's group once, and we just organized it ourselves. But the power of intention was so strong. Like the power of invitation for everybody to contribute was so beautiful, was so powerful, that it took on a life of its own. And I don't,
it does that.
I don't even know where to start with that, but really it's like almost when you get going after the first sentence or after the first introduction, it really creates such a,
It sure does. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
And you mentioned like the history a little bit of men's work. You mentioned like 30 years. I haven't heard it put that way, but we've been on this planet, I think, in this level of, like this incarnation of our species, or, this stage of evolution for about 50,000 years, but we're only.
So what I'm referring to is kind of the really the beginning of the men's movement. Mm-hmm. Now, men have been gathering in tribe for thousands of years. Yeah. Men have been going through initiation for thousands and thousands of years. But in terms of men's work, it really started about 30, 35 years ago, and then grew into what was called the mythopoetic movement, which is like Robert Bly and the guys who started Mankind Project, like Bill Kauth. And then you have guys like William, I think it was William Farrell. And these guys who started modern men's initiation weekends, mm-hmm. and then men's groups. Yeah. And so in that form, kind of like women have been gathering and doing women's work for thousands of years, but really the women's movement really started with, sure, in the suffragette movement and whenever that was, but women's lib really birthed in the late 60s and 70s. So just talking about the current modern form of men's work has really just been over the past 30 to 35 years. And now especially it's proliferating, especially because of the times that we're in, the Me Too era, and with all the explosion of the gender power balance shift that's happening right now. More women are graduating university, more women are in medical school. The amount of women now that are CEOs and executives is, it's skyrocketing. Women are highly independent now. And so with that gender power balance shift, men are in a place now where they're being called to task to evolve themselves. And so now more than ever, men have to do this work because women are demanding that of their men. There's some statistic I read recently around, the percentage of divorces are something like 85 of them are initiated by women now because women need their men to evolve.
Yeah, we're definitely coming out of a dark age for men, an age of disempowerment. I think that's kind of inversely correlated with the empowerment of women.
Yeah.
It's a time to restructure what we know as men's power, for sure. I agree with that. I'd love to hear, like, I'm 51 and although I've been on my path for a long time in many ways, in kind of a whole way, an entire way, one that encompasses my entire life, like every single part of my life, this is a fairly, it's a more recent part of my journey for me. What brought you onto this path that what was what's been your journey, and what you realize that this is the work that you want to do? How did that happen?
Yeah. So it happened through my own suffering, through my own confusion, and through my own darkness, my own dark journey.
Yeah.
Getting married young, and then of course marriage brings up all of your shadows, all of your stuff. The great mirror of intimate relationship, so a lot of suffering in that, and then having a man say, "All right, you got to do some men's work." I was like, "Okay, what is that?" And so I entered into the structured men's work. I was already doing a form of men's work. I just didn't know it was called men's work. But that's another story. So I started on my path, got very active in that work, and on my spiritual path, and studying Buddhism and studying deep inner work, cathartic work, shadow work, and being in a men's group, every week for 10 years, learning how to process, working on retreats, and then becoming a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher, and then living in a tantric ashram, Tibetan Buddhist ashram, and all these things just kind of continually pushing me into, I'm going to help this person, I'm going to work with this person, I'm going to support this person, and then it was just a natural evolution into going from that lens into strictly supporting men in men's deep inner work and seeing the need for it. And it's just the path just unfolded, in front of me, and said, this is what needs to be done. I resisted it for quite a while. And I kept getting messages, especially from women, saying, you have to do this. Like, I don't know if I really want to just devote all my time to men's work. No, you have to do this. And so finally I said, okay, and I surrendered to that, and now it's been an amazing journey, because we've really built a phenomenal community around the world and affected thousands of men, and it's been very rewarding. Yeah, so that's it. I think a lot of people, most people on the path, they come to the path because they're suffering.
Yeah,
I
agree. I agree in reflection, as I hear that from, I hear that and I see that all around me. That's been my experience personally, myself. And so within that journey, I know within mine that I also was in pain. I didn't have the reflections. I didn't have a spouse that was saying, you need to try this, you need to go here. They were all things that I had to discover kind of in my own bones. And within my own bones, I also did discover, and it's kind of the reason for the topic of the show, I did discover that, I was led by something else, because I was being led into pain by certain paradigms. And then what led me out of pain was another paradigm. I'm just wondering if you can recall a time, a point in your journey where something began to open up for you, or the work that you were doing began to speak to you in a certain way? Or was that part of the work you were doing, either, the meditation, or was there something that really started to kind of pull you in and made you realize that?
I mean, I think, what stands out is going to be peak experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are going to remember those peak experiences. And so one peak experience was being with other men and just being cracked wide open, tears pouring out, snot gushing out on the floor, just like emptying out, 20 something years of, of anger and contraction and fear. And so just being cracked open. And yeah, so that peak moment, saying, oh, and in that cracking open, there's an insight that happens, like, oh, whoa, okay, wow, this is the whole reality I created. Oh, wow, okay, my parents, and then this,
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you have those peak moments, you say, oh, I want more, right? And so kept going for more, kept going for more. And so I stayed very, very deep and active in that deep inner work, which we could say really lives more in the therapeutic realms, in terms of like when we're talking about different ways of doing growth work. Therapy. When I'm talking about therapeutic, I'm talking about doing some kind of a therapy, something where you're applying a healing application, fixing something that's kind of broken. Like if you think of like your skin is broken when you get a cut, not that you're broken as a person, but your skin is broken, you've broken open, there's a wound there, and that wound needs some kind of healing. An application needs to be applied, whether it's an ointment, a salve, and a Band-Aid, or whether it's banging your elbow on the table and putting your hand there. It's a healing application, whatever that wound is. So that's more of a kind of therapeutic approach, right? And so that's what we're doing in some of the more traditional men's work, any kind of work for any person. If they're doing inner child work, if they're doing forgiveness work, if they're doing, wound work, if they're doing any of these kind of more therapeutic things where something that's wounded needs to be healed, which we all do as humans. It's important, especially if you have trauma, and we all have trauma. But then there's also another aspect that at some point I said, okay, I need something else. And I'd already been studying Buddhism for a long time. I'd already been to India many times, and I was into yoga and meditation. But I said, okay, I really need to focus on something else. And then my teacher showed up, and so then I just did spiritual work for many years. I kind of stepped out of the kind of therapeutic wound work, and I just did spiritual work, meditation, all the different kind of Buddhist practices, meditation practice, mantra practice, yoga, mindfulness, breath, pranayama, all that stuff, right? And then after some time, I started having, all my patterns and issues and habits of insecurity and anger and fear and all this stuff were surfacing again. I said, I really need to get back in and I need to address this shadow. I needed to just work with anger.
Right.
So then I went back in and started doing men's work. And then at that point, it was just kind of an even amount of both. And it was an interesting going from just deep psychological based therapeutic kind of work into just spiritual work, and then doing both, and then seeing, oh, now I can integrate both of these. There's many different beautiful components that can really help on our path of growth. Not to say you can't only do spiritual work, and not to say you can't only do that, but for me, it's and I think a lot of people are realizing this now. There really needs to be a blend of both of those. And even like when I went to Osho's commune in India many years ago, India was advanced in the spiritual realms, and the West is advanced in the psychological realms, right? So we're more advanced with working with emotion and with sexuality, whereas in India they're more advanced in working with spiritual practice and meditation, right? And so you have this East and West, and even thinking about when Osho was doing his work way back, 25 plus years ago, before he'd even let people into a room to do spiritual practice, they had to deal with their anger. They had to go and do some psychological processes to get them to a place where they can even sit still.
Right.
So I'm just giving an example of, one small example of that. And so I love the work that I do because it really is a comprehensive blend of like this therapeutic, psychological work mixed with spiritual practice, mindfulness work, energetic works, and then embodiment work, bringing it into your body. And then all of those pieces together, just giving people a really kind of comprehensive approach to working on their path.
Right. Beautiful.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, that makes total sense. And I wanted to go back and reflect on the part of that you were speaking about initially, the sort of like you didn't use the word epiphany, but like, to have like a big experience that comes from sharing, sharing from your shadow, sharing from, what is the most painful for you with others. That's painful. Like to do that is painful. It's painful because, I mean, it's painful because to be in an experience where you're exposing that much vulnerability, firstly to yourself and then around others, to name in front of others, which you haven't even named probably, or possibly named yourself, or at least using the spoken word is painful. I mean, to begin with, it's a painful process to go through that. It speaks of pain. And, and I'm thinking ahead, of course, into what is there beyond the pain. And I'm just wondering if you can, you could tell us from your own experience, like going into that with men, going into the shit that is there, that you're revealing, that brings out the pain and the anguish and the tears with others. What does that in turn provide that, where you turn around afterwards, you say, wow, that was amazing. That was great. Or I want more of that. What is in that experience for others to even like consider wanting to, unveil more of themselves? It's hidden.
Could you just hone it in and give me the question a little more concise?
For sure. Well, given that sharing with others, let's say in a men's group or any kind of process work is difficult, it's difficult to be vulnerable. And I think it's what most people are afraid of doing. We all are wearing masks in our day to day. We all are, to a certain degree, we're all pretending a certain amount. And in the men's work, part of it is to reveal what is authentic and what is true. And doing that, I'm suggesting, is a painful thing to do. It's painful. It's painful to do that.
Sure, it is. Yeah, it's yeah.
And I'm just, I'm just wondering, and if you can remember, that would probably be the best way to do it, to remember, like when you did that, or maybe the first time you can remember doing that, you had this epiphany, or you had this, this
peak moment. Yeah.
What felt good about it? What felt good about it at some point?
Yeah. For me, I mean, simply put, it's just it takes a lot of energy to be in resistance to our to what is, and that's how we live. We live in resistance to all of our crap. I mean, I had a guy last night that was deep in anger, and everyone had done all this stuff, and one of the gentlemen just was having all the anger, was just total resistance. And it was, resistance is like pain times resistance equals suffering. So if you have pain, you're like, oh, I feel pain, like I was treated this way and I have all this pain. And then you're like, no, no, I'm not gonna do that. So pain times resistance, suffer, right? It just amplifies it.
Right.
So when you have a peak moment, or when the armor cracks open and the resistance drops, you just free up all this energy in your body. It's like removing a kink in a hose. It's freedom.
Yeah.
And now we can get into a little bit, if we look at kind of the masculine imperative, meaning kind of like the thing that the masculine, now we're getting to a whole different subject here. And it can, so when I'm talking about the masculine, I'm not talking only about men. I'm not talking about a certain box that someone has to live in, but I'm talking about the masculine as an energetic, or as qualities of the masculine. So one of the qualitative aspects of the masculine, we could say, is freedom, right? This consciousness or freedom. And so especially, I'll say, it's for any human, but especially for men to have a moment of freedom from that resistance is especially meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Because of all the social and biological constructs that are there about how we're supposed to relate to our emotions. And now we experience a moment of freedom. And, you know, if one of the masculine imperatives is freedom, we could say, even if we look at a simple thing like the stereotype of why men avoid relationship, because they want freedom, right? They don't want to be tied down. That's like a stereotype, right?
Yeah.
Of men.
Yeah.
So this is what a man who is identified with being masculine is. It's one of the things we seek. We don't want to be constrained. We want to have a sense of freedom. And so that is the experience that men have. I mean, it's the experience any human has when they let down their guard and they open up, but especially for men, because so much of the teachings in men's work is around how to work in consciousness, which is, you know, a whole nother rabbit hole I can go into if you want. But yeah, it's a sense of freedom and openness and freedom from resistance.
Yeah.
And so you lower the suffering. You may still feel pain, but with resistance gone, it's just pain. And when you learn how to relate directly to pain, which is just energy in your body, which is what a yogi learns to work with, right? How to move energy through your body, flow, flexibility and flow. And so that's what men keep coming back for. I mean, that's what we're all seeking, right? A spiritual being is ultimately seeking to become more awakened, which is about becoming more free, less self-identified, less in, you know, more being able to relate to what is from a place of skillfulness and from a place of practice, rather than just living through filters and collapse and restriction.
Thank you for providing that really useful, powerful formula. I've not heard anybody put it that way, to say suffering is equal to pain plus time. That
It's pain times resistance.
pain times resistance.
Yeah.
Okay. I converted that. I converted that, yeah, because resistance is really a sort of a time, you know, adds a time factor to it. That you're not allowing pain to come to surface, to show. You're not allowing pain out, and that contributes to your suffering.
And somehow, yeah, that's been misconstrued over many thousands of years. That's been misconstrued as the way that a man should be, but we know that that's not, and it's not healthy, and it's not good for the human body. It's not good for relationship. It's not very useful for anything. Resistance, that is.
Yeah.
Pain's very useful. Pain's a great doorway, right?
Pain is a great doorway. Pain is the reason why we're sitting here today and we're speaking. Pain is the reason, why you found your path, and most of us find ours, and we don't need to suffer, is what I'm hearing from what you're saying, and the release of that tension that comes from withholding and resisting the pain that we really want to express. So that was the first thing, is just to say, like, this is happening. It's true. I'm in the reality of this, and and it hurts to just resist the truth of that, because it imposes on our freedom, as you're saying, which is imperative. I would call it an imperative of both men and women, but in our own specific way for men, that imposes on that very imperative, that we cannot be free if we're limiting the expression of our pain, and therefore we suffer.
Yeah, I mean, what's the catchphrase in all personal growth? I mean, if you ask most people, well, what do you want? Well, sure, they have all their different wants, but ultimately, people want to, what's the word they use? I just want to be authentic. I want to be in my authentic self. I want to have my authentic self shine through. I want to be more in my authentic core. And so what is being authentic? Right? It's not having resistance to what is real, what is true within us, our pain, our suffering, our vulnerability. And so when you remove so what keeps us from being vulnerable is our resistance to sharing some self-imposed idea of what may happen if we open up. And so when that resistance is removed, then there's this sense of freedom, and then we can actually be authentic with someone.
Mm-hmm. That in the non-resistance, or coming back to being in an authentic place, which is to not resist what is painful for us, and allowing that to show, allowing that to just be, we can be in our authentic selves. And then that, I feel, and at least in communion with other men, allows for another experience. It allows for what wouldn't be really possible without that. It allows for connection, so that can provide a further level of joy or benefit to going into the pain, to just be free, and then to be able to connect, because you're no longer hiding some part of yourself, in the company of others.
Yeah, and there's just a healing that happens when you reveal.
Mm-hmm.
There's a healing that happens.
And
that's, yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
There's some, probably something we can't fully define with words. And yet, there is a prolific resistance to it. So there's that which can, that causes, I'm equating that with desire. If we know, if we can get into that authentic place, then we can feel what's there, and then we can be, we can be in the company of what we know is true, and within what is true, we'll know what we desire, what we don't, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. Without that, how could we possibly know? We've got everything compartmentalized and contained. What do you see, like, in your work, or what do you see as the biggest resistance to that? What is the biggest resistance to being?
I don't know that there's any one biggest resistance. And, we're talking about men versus women. There's a different way that we relate to it. If we look at how men relate to desire versus how women relate to desire, let's just even talk about sexually.
Mm-hmm.
Start with sexual desire.
Yeah.
So in neuroscience research, what they found was that men have desire first. Part of the brain gets activated. They have desire first, then arousal happens. Whereas women need to have arousal before it triggers desire. And then if we kind of translate that into like the conscious sexual models, maybe we could call the, Eastern philosophies on sexual energy, women take time, right? The way that their nervous systems are innervated, it takes time, right? It's called foreplay. Women need that. So women are warm in the heart, cool in the genitals. Men are cool in the heart, warm in the genitals. And so that arousal needs to happen, then desire is created. Whereas, men have a desire, and then instantaneously the arousal is there. It's pretty, like, they have a thought, desire, oh, I desire to have sex. Thought, and penis gets erect immediately, right? Women take that slow arousal time, and then the desire, then the heart opens. And, there's many other factors. Women need to feel safe in order to, really open. Now we're getting into where in men's work, what we're really working with is the thing women want most is deep presence of awareness, which is, really, we could say, the main focus in men's work. So that's one place we can look, and how desire shows up. Also for men, we can look at how men are trained, through their modeling to relate to desire. We can make it about, whether it's about sexuality or whether it's about, men don't relate to things that they want to create through the idea of desire. Like I used to use that word when I would, in my writing for a workshop description, but I just found over and over, men are like, what do you mean by desire? Like, you mean like desiring a woman? Like, no, just your desire, the thing that drives you forward. Now, through the Buddhist lens, maybe some guys have heard about what desire is. So let me back up a little bit. Men are trained to suppress desire. We're not taught to ask for that, that we really desire. Men are the imprints, let's say, around sexuality. We're taught about sexual conquest. That means something about you as a man. Stature, power, having money. It's not really driven. It's driven by desire, but it's also driven by societal imprint around what we think we're supposed to be as men.
Yes.
And so, particularly in men's work, when we start talking about, well, what do you desire? It's a new way of relating for men to relate to what they want. And then men start speaking about, well, what I really desire in my sexual life, because they've never spoken about it to their partners.
Mm-hmm.
I really desire more connection. I'm just always just trying to, make her have an amazing orgasm so that she feels fulfilled and I feel better about myself because I did my job. There's all this repression around desire, which is directly linked to, men's habituation around not feeling themselves, right? Not being sensitive and not being embodied. I may be talking about kind of more advanced concepts. So you can back me off if I'm getting too deep into stuff that this isn't making sense.
I think it makes sense. I think it makes perfect sense. I think most men watching this and most, would agree or would agree from experience.
Yeah.
Right.
So a guy who's embodied, a guy who has a deep sense of embodiment, which is really just about being a highly sensitive being, a highly sensitive man. You have the ability to really sense what's going on in your internal life and your external life. You're gonna be more in touch with what you desire. Desire, depending on how you relate to it, can be a healthy thing, or of course it can be a really unhealthy thing, right? One of the teachings says desire is the main ingredient for your suffering. So right, and in some of the Eastern teachings, desire is equated to demons, right? Every time you slay one desire, a new demon pops up, or a new desire. Blades of grass, one desire, you're chasing after the other. So that's kind of a limited perspective on desire.
Mm-hmm.
Desire has intelligence to it. Desire reveals to us where we need to be moving. And of course, if your desire is driven by how you relate to yourself. So if you see yourself as incomplete, then the object of your desires is going to be something that makes you feel more complete, better about yourself. Hence the idea for having sexual conquest for men and those programs. So if we can touch into the true nature of desire, like there's something that's revealed in that. There's an intelligence in there. There's a real intelligence. And for me to ask a man, just take a moment. What do you really desire in your sexual life? What do you truly desire? What do you really desire in your purpose, in your life, in your purpose? What do you really desire? And so when we can remove the self-identification around it, well, if I do this, it means this about me. If I build this big business, it means I'm a powerful guy and people are going to look at me as being valuable. And when we can remove those pieces and just tune into the actual intelligence that desire can provide for us, it's a really powerful experience. And I keep using the sexual one because it's such a simple one, simple in the way that when you ask a man, if you just get really real for a moment, what do you really desire in your sexual life? Guys will stop and go, wow, I haven't really thought about that. When you get past all the, can you hear ambulances? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna just back up and slow down a little bit.
Actually, I'm gonna.
Yeah, you jump in here. Yeah, I revealed a lot of information.
Thought to narrow it, or possibly dumb it down, or to create it, to simplify it. When I began the show today, just to talk about like the simple things that we know, If I'm really in the mood for like chicken, barbecue chicken, like it's going. I'm going to begin to salivate, and I am going to create in accordance with what my desire is. It's going to lead me because that's what I want. Okay, you know what? Let's go. You go here. You go get the chicken. I'll get the spices. I'm going to get the stuff for the barbecue. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
going to create a sequence of actions that comes from a very simple thing. And of course, sex is more complicated actually, but one of the most one of the 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 most enjoyable and enticing of things that we can
Mm-hmm.
do and that we can relate to and that bring a certain level of elation. But this idea of just um, having a simple pleasure. I was in the car yesterday and I hadn't listened to music in almost a week, and I put music on. And I actually asked myself this question, and I'm a dancer and I love music. Can I still get excited by music? I felt so dry in that moment because I've been on the phone or working. And when I put the music on, it opened up, it completely changed my world. It brought my juices began to flow. I started to feel my body, and I started to feel like all of my emotions, and then everything else from that point forward, I held and looked at and felt and dealt with completely differently. It just changed, it changed everything about my experience. So I'm wondering, and I hear everything that you're saying. Like, to me, what everything you're saying equates into that we spend a lot of time in our heads. We spend a lot of time in in our assessment of what we ought to be doing. Of course, that's just that higher level of consciousness, or that upper level, that head level of consciousness. What's preventing us? What would you consider to be what's preventing us from feeling what we want? What do we want, from the simple place to a more complicated place like sexuality, to an even more complicated place like, how do I want to interact and exchange with this world? Like, and I know it's the answer is probably diverse, but maybe
I would say,
you can
I would
speak
say,
from your
yeah,
own experience, because that's the
yeah.
best place to speak
So
from.
your question is what prevents us from feeling or knowing our desires? What prevents us from working towards from taking action
Yeah,
in
what gets
manifest?
you're working with men. What do you see as some of the reasons that gets in the way? What's getting in the way for men to? I mean, you've mentioned some of them, so if there's anything more
I
that
mean, look, it sounds like what you're really talking about. You're talking about what gets in the way of people manifesting their desire.
feeling it and manifesting from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I mean, quite simply, it's how people relate to their mind. So if we look at, the how do you manifest? We're really talking about, how do you manifest? Because you can have a desire, right? And so what keeps people from manifesting their desire? It's your mindset, it's your belief system, it's all your imprints and your filters, it's all your wounds, it's the way that you see the world. And so that if you live in a belief system of low self-esteem, low worth, because of your your upbringing, your nurturing, how you were nurtured, your attachment issues, how are you going to create anything if you're in a negative mind state? Essentially, it's in a negative mind state. I mean,
Or anything good.
Joe Dispenza talks really beautifully about this. If you've ever watched any of his stuff, he's brilliant on his whole teaching on
I have
this.
been lately. My lady's been getting into him, so I've been.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's in terms of owning desire and feeling desire. Um, that's how we live. We live by desire. What keeps us from manifesting our desire is our belief structure, all of our programs, all of our conditioning,
Yeah.
the filters through how we see the world prevent us from, we hit these glass ceilings all the time. And someone who is on the path of awakening is going to keep revealing these, and they're going to learn to work to create a generative mindset. They're going to learn to work in the embodiment realms. Our thoughts are the language of our brain, and our feelings are the language of our body. And when you learn to work in your body with feelings and emotions, and you're able to witness your own mind that goes into its normal habituation, right? So I told the story just the other day when I was really deep in the beginning stages of this practice. And I was driving down the street one day in Los Angeles, and I was in traffic. I got negative. Traffic showed up. I thought I was going to be late for something. My mind just spiraled. And I was able to see, oh, here's my mind going into that rut. I saw my mind go into, I'm going to be late. If I'm late, then I'm not going to be respected. If I'm not respected, I'm not going to be successful. And my mind just started spiraling, and I can see my negative mind state in real time happening.
Yeah.
And so then there's this thing called the reticular activating system. Have you ever heard of that?
I have, but I don't remember what it is.
So reticular activating system is this lima bean sized thing at the base of your skull. It's like a nerve bundle. And basically what it does is it filters out things for you, so that because life is so busy and filled with things, it filters out things that you don't need, extraneous things. So if you're in a room, right, in a conference with 500 people, and then someone says, Ian, you hear that, and you're like, you could hear that. Now, yes, your name is Ian, but this is part of how your brain works.
Right.
And so I remember, like, the first time I wanted this car that I wanted a white Toyota 4Runner. I don't know how many years ago, 25 years.
Sexy.
And I hadn't seen them anywhere. And then I saw one, I said, oh, I like that. Then I started building a desire for that. I was like, oh yeah, I really want that. Then it started building. What happened after that? My RAS, reticular activating system, filtered out all the other cars. All I saw on the road was white Toyota 4Runners. That's
right.
it.
The idea behind selective perception, or like why we don't see vowels in the words that we read. We parse that information out, useless information, noise.
Right. So the same thing that this reticular activating system works with your beliefs as well. Mm-hmm. So your brain filters out everything. It only looks for proof of the beliefs that you have about reality and about yourself. Mm-hmm. So you can walk into a situation where everyone's like, hey, good to see you. And you can walk in and you'll just see, oh, that person didn't look at me. Oh, they gave me a weird look. How come so-and-so didn't come to my party? You filter out everything based on your belief system. Mm. And so this is part of what makes up how you manifest in the world. So you can have a desire, and you may not even feel a desire because all you see around you is proof of the beliefs that are imprinted in you. And so you create what your subconscious, what you believe, and what you think. And then, of course, what you speak, the temple at which you pray, is part of your manifestation process. So we keep manifesting more of what we don't want.
Right.
So that's one way to look at why people or men or anyone doesn't work with desires, because of this habituation that's at play every day because we have our glasses on,
Yeah. That's a beautiful answer. That's a beautiful answer. Thank you for providing.
And men have their particular flavor with that. Women are definitely more in tune with desire. Mm-hmm. They're more in tune with their body. Their nervous systems are innervated in a different way than men are. Men use something called let me see if I can remember it. Let's see. It is called the temporal parietal junction. Temporal parietal. That's how men. This is in neuroscience how men's brains work. So men tend to switch to temporal parietal junction, which is about problem solving and goal orientation. It's not just a stereotype. It's actually how the male brain works. This woman, Luann Brizendine, wrote this great book called The Male Brain, which I just was quoting a little piece from. She says, she was trapped in her female brain circuit. He was trapped in his male brain circuit using TJP, which is the temporal parietal junction, for cognitive processing emotions and getting to a fix-it-fast solution. And her female brain was using the mirror neuron system, which is all about feeling and expression. And so part of the way that men relate to desire is through this goal orientation, fix it fast. What's the fastest way that we can make this manifest? And we miss out on the deeper layers of our desire because we're in this fix it mindset, right? Men live in their heads. Men just want to fix things. Mm-hmm. And so this could allude possibly to Another way for men to relate to desire is coming more, as I talked about embodiment, coming into your body and feeling what is really true for you and what it is that you really desire, like in terms of your sexual life, in terms of your purpose, in terms of what you want to create. It's coming into a feeling state. What do you want to create?
Mm-hmm.
What do you really truly desire? And it's a powerful exercise for men because most haven't really tuned into it, because it takes sensitivity to ourself.
Mm-hmm.
It takes intimacy with ourself, and that's not something that most men aren't comfortable with. Maybe a small handful of new age dudes, but mostly on generally speaking, it's not
Yeah.
a common thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And intimacy and resistance in the same way that you spoke about your peak experience, sharing with men. I think in the same way, in that level of revealing a vulnerability in ourselves and an intimacy within ourselves. We're not expressing with another. We have that ability to do even within or especially within our own body. We resist that too, to drop into our own body and allow what is there to reveal itself and to express itself.
Yeah, it feels pretty damn good.
Feels pretty
So,
damn good.
and any guy that's watching this, it's a great practice to do on a regular basis. Just sit down, anyone, man or woman, sit down, feel in your body what it is you desire. Now, there's a whole other piece that that I was just sharing about, which is your whole belief structure and your filters. And so now we're getting into, well, is what I desire really the truth, or is it just my insecurity? I really desire to do this, or to do whatever your example is. And that is the tricky part, is to know if what you desire is coming from a place of true knowing, deep intuition from truth, or is it just coming from some kind of wound, some kind of filter?
Mhm.
And one way that you can reveal whether it's coming from truth or not is by saying, if I get this, I want this desire because, and so then you just fill in the blank. Now, of course, there's going to be something I want this desire to manifest because. There's always going to be some selfish reason, because I want to be valued, I want to be welcomed, I want to be accepted, but that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
But you can sort of gauge based on that answer, I want this desire to manifest because. In your answer, there'll be something that is revealed in there, whether this thing that you want is really just coming from a place of your wound, or if it's coming from a deeper sense of knowing. If if it has a powerful, if there's some kind of deep revelation in that, like the work that I do, I want this to manifest, my men's work, because I want to be valued,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be successful,
Right.
I want to be honored and respected,
Mm-hmm.
and because I want to decrease violence in the world. I want to decrease violence against women and children. I want to decrease rapes in the world. I want to help evolve men so that men aren't suffering as much, so that the planet doesn't suffer as much. And so from my answer, I can really get a sense of if my desire is, whatever you want to call it, a true desire, or if it's just coming from a place of neurosis, we could say.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. And I think, I'm 51, and others who are out there who have tried several things or have been on several paths can use that line of questioning, and can also ask the question of how successful they have been at being able to define what they wanted to create in the past. Have they failed, screwed up, fucked up? Have they been able to successfully manifest in accordance with what they felt they want? I know that in my case, when I ask questions, prolific questions, I wasn't. Sometimes I was, but actually, mostly I was not able to create in accordance with what I really wanted, because I didn't end up creating that thing. And it was only once I started to know what, hey, I like chocolate over vanilla. Hey, I like the feeling of that over that. When I dropped into my body more, did those answers actually come through a more intelligent source.
And remember that the reticular activating system is always working to help you to find proof because your subconscious doesn't want to be wrong. You don't want to be wrong. So it's looking for proof to make sure that you're right, because being wrong doesn't feel good. And so if you have a desire, we could put it in spiritual terms too. I'm putting it more in the science terms. If you can be a witness, if you can see, oh yeah, I can see, I want to move. I want to move out of this town. But everywhere you go, you keep seeing the negative reasons if you move. Well, look, that's telling me that that'll happen if I move. If I move out of this area, this is bad. This is what. So you need to be able to witness the things that keep showing themselves.
Yes.
We could say karma showing itself to help keep you in limitation. And so if you are able to see the habit of your mind that keeps trying to prove to you why you shouldn't have the thing you desire, it's a really helpful practice. It's just a self-awareness practice. That you can watch your mind state. Writing, journaling is really powerful. Doing any kind of meditation, mindfulness work, writing about your desire, letting your heart be the guide to letting your desire kind of pour out on a piece of paper, free from, your any kind of hyper intellectualization. Just letting it flow freely is a really powerful exercising, and letting your desires be revealed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As well as listening to the signs in the world, the various ways that reflect to us what is going on beneath what we can see with our conscious mind and our conscious eyes, in our dreams and in our in our surroundings, what's manifesting outside that we tend to ignore because they might conflict with, or we are resisting them in our conscious awareness. Thank you so much, Zat. This was beautiful. And I got one last question for you. You're there, you're traveling, I know you're in the thick of it. You're in, you're in work mode, and you're doing what you love, which you expressed you love at the beginning, before we started recording, which is, that you like to travel. Well, what, after the many years that you've been in this work, what keeps you in your inspiration, would you say?
Remaining open to possibility. I mean, I say this at least a few times a week. I said it last night. I was talking to a guy and I said, I'm open to possibility. So just remaining open to possibility. And whether that is a new project, a new vision, a new collaboration, a new way of relating to things. One of the beautiful prayers that my teacher shared with me long ago was the prayer that when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that comes to mind is, may I open more deeply to life. May I open more deeply to life today than I did yesterday. So just being open to possibility for things to show themselves. And in that way, things like new possibilities happen. Like last night, I had a new opportunity just from being open to possibility and open to flow, and things happened, and that keeps me inspired. I don't have to just do this one thing in this one way.
Right.
So
love that.
That's helpful for me.
Yeah, that's a great reflection. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess we will wrap up. Zat, you have a gift for everybody watching today. Would you mind letting everyone know what that is?
Yeah, I have a couple meditations on my site. My site is under we're creating new media content, but there are a couple of good meditation. There's a men's embodiment practice, and then there's a really great breath meditation practice, which is one of my favorite practices ever in all of my life. It's really about digesting tension in the body. And so if they want to go to the site, they just use the code FULLCOMP, FULLCOMP. If you go to zatbaraka.com and you click on tools, you'll see there's a couple meditations there. The tantric breathwork meditation is a great general purpose everyday practice. It's a powerful practice. It's been one of my main practices for 20 years. And they can use that code to FULLCOMP to get that. And the other thing I'd offer is that men are interested in knowing more about what men's work is, or what men's coaching would look like. They can always email me, Zat at Zat Baraka, and we can schedule a time to Just spend some time on the phone, no strings attached, just having a conversation to see if this kind of work is something that would be beneficial.
Awesome. That's
Yeah.
really generous of you. Thank you. And all that information that Zat just shared will be, if you see that button on the page lower down, just click on it and it'll give you all the information on how you can access these links and just a little bit more about what Zat just described. So thank you, Zat, again. Thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me. I look forward to more.
And thanks everybody here for watching. Bye for now.